Hey guys! Tonight we drift softly above the clouds, just as dusk stains Mount Olympus with sleepy rose-gold light. The wind hushes. Marble halls glow faintly in the moonlight. You can just make out the silhouettes of gods and goddesses lounging on their thrones, some already half asleep, others arguing over who left ambrosia out again. And in the distance, hidden in a corner of the divine world where no thunder dares to rumble too loudly, something very unusual is beginning to happen. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Not because it's dangerous, but because trying to keep up with ancient Greek family trees and whose sibling is a headache best reserved for immortal beings. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You float downward now, slow and quiet, like a falling fig leaf, until your toes brush the soft moss of Olympus's hidden gardens. Somewhere nearby, a thunder god is pacing nervously. Zeus, ruler of the skies, wielder of lightning, notorious romantic opportunist, is wrestling with something far more complicated than a Titan uprising. Feelings. Or, at least, something suspiciously like them. He's just returned from yet another trip down to Earth. This time, it was Thebes, an ancient city still humming with poetry, ritual fires, and bad plumbing. There, he saw her. Semele. Mortal. Beautiful. Doomed, probably, because when has falling for Zeus ever worked out for anyone? To be fair, Semele wasn't exactly looking for trouble. She was a priestess, minding her own altars, burning her own incense, trying to interpret the vague smoke patterns of oracles without getting cursed. But Zeus being Zeus, well, you know how it goes. He disguised himself, some say as a mortal man, others insist he wore the full godly glow. Historians still argue whether it was love at first sight, or just the first thunderbolt of the season. What's certain is that Semele didn't stand a chance. One day she's making offerings to the heavens, the next she's being seduced by a man who literally is the heavens. And somewhere in that mess of starlight and secrets, a child was conceived. Now, back on Olympus, Zeus is quietly panicking. Not because he's going to be a father, again, but because he knows what's coming next. Enter Hera, wife, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, irony fully noted, and perhaps the only being in the cosmos who could outmatch Zeus in sheer, unrelenting spite when crossed. To say Hera doesn't take infidelity well is like saying Medusa has a minor hair issue. She has her ways. Sometimes it's a storm. Sometimes it's turning rivals into cows. Once it was a surprise birth of serpents. She's creative. So Zeus does what he always does when he makes a mortal mess. He hides it. He shields Semele with clouds, cloaks her in mystery, builds for her a secret chamber in a grove somewhere on the edge of visibility. And in that chamber, Semele begins to swell with child. Not just any child, a divine child. Meanwhile, Olympus continues its celestial soap opera. Apollo polishes his lyre strings for the 5th time that day. Athena reads quietly but takes notes. She suspects something's up. And you, invisible and quiet, drift through it all, watching the gears of fate begin to grind. Now, let's talk about a fun little detail that rarely makes it into textbooks. There are some ancient versions of this myth that say bees were drawn to Semele's belly while she was pregnant. Bees, sacred to Dionysus, buzzing with symbolic importance, making honey as if to prepare the world for the god of wine. It's weird, it's poetic, and it makes you wonder how many ancient myths were just oddly specific fever dreams brought on by fermented figs. Still, the tension is rising. Hera has heard rumors. She follows them like a bloodhound made of storm clouds and vendettas. She finds the mortal woman eventually. Of course she does. But Hera doesn't unleash fury outright. No. This time, she's subtle. Whispers in disguise. A kindly old woman at Semele's door. And the suggestion, if he really is a god, shouldn't he show you his true form? Just once. Which is where the trouble really starts. Semele, already dizzy with divine attention, pregnant and glowing, asks Zeus, pleads, really, to reveal himself in full glory. She wants the truth. But gods, when fully unmasked, are not for mortal eyes. Zeus hesitates. He tries to warn her, but he's sworn an oath. And oaths, even by gods, are binding in these stories. So he does it. Just for a moment, he unveils. And she burns. Not metaphorically, not poetically, just fire. Mortal flesh wasn't meant to handle lightning. The chamber turns to ash. The perfume scorches the air. You watch from a distance, covering your eyes. And from that terrible blaze, one flicker of life remains, the unborn child. Zeus dives into the wreckage. And here, finally, things get strange. Because instead of giving the child to a wet nurse or asking one of the goddesses for help, he does the next best thing. He slices open his own thigh and tucks the baby inside. You read that right. Not the belly, the thigh. Somewhere high up near the hip, in that sacred immortal meat. He stitches it shut with some kind of radiant thread, clenches his jaw, and walks it off like the godliest of dads. Now you're probably thinking, was that normal? And the answer is, in Greek myth, yes, surprisingly. They loved a good rebirth narrative. Historians still argue whether this particular tale symbolized male fertility, divine parenting, or just the gods trolling biology. But there he stays. Dionysus. Unborn, yet alive. A fetus in a thunder thigh. And you curl up somewhere nearby, exhausted from all the divine melodrama, drifting gently to sleep as Olympus debates what on earth to do with this incoming wine god. Zeus tries to walk normally, but there's only so much swagger you can manage with a magical fetus stitched into your thigh. Every step is a reminder, not just of the strange child nestled under divine skin, but of how badly things went with Semele. Still, he limps around Olympus with the same stern dignity he uses during thunderstorms. No one says anything out loud, of course. But the nymphs are whispering. The satyrs are smirking. Even Hermes, who normally respects Zeus, has to bite his lip. The gods have seen a lot. Titans decapitated, monsters birthed from chaos. That one time Apollo turned a guy into a laurel tree. But this? A full-on thigh pregnancy? This is new, even for them. Meanwhile, down on Earth, Thebes is in mourning. Semele's family, King Cadmus and Queen Harmonia, are inconsolable. Their daughter has been reduced to mythic collateral damage. Officially, she's died in a fire caused by a lightning strike. Unofficially, everyone suspects divine involvement. It always is. In Greek tragedies, sudden combustion usually has Zeus's fingerprints all over it. But back on Olympus, time ticks forward. The baby inside Zeus grows. Strange, divine, utterly unique. And you're there, floating gently through the clouds, watching how even gods start to get nervous around the unknown. They speak in low tones over nectar. What'll he be like? Will he have Hera's eyes? Should we be worried about this one too? Some whisper he'll be a bringer of chaos. Others predict music, wine, and ecstatic joy. One prophet, somewhere in Delphi, dreams of ivy wrapping around his temple and wakes up in a cold sweat. Historians still argue whether early accounts of Dionysus were even talking about the same figure. Some say he was originally a foreign god imported from Thrace or Phrygia, only later woven into the Greek pantheon like a vine crawling up a marble column. Anyway, There's not much to do but wait. Zeus avoids long walks. He cancels a few thunderstorm appointments. At one point, you catch him trying to read a scroll upside down, clearly distracted. And then, the moment comes. It starts, as these things often do, with a crack of lightning. Not from anger this time, but from sheer cosmic tension. The fabric of Olympus trembles slightly, and Zeus, now glowing faintly at the seams, winces. He doubles over. There are no midwives on Olympus. No soft music or boiling water. Just a god with a glowing leg and a very determined expression. He groans, less like a laboring parent and more like someone dislodging a celestial splinter. A beam of light bursts from his thigh, and from it tumbles a child. But not just any child. He is radiant, laughing, somehow both newborn and ancient. His curls are damp with ambrosia. He smells faintly of grapes, crushed grass, and something wild, like the first storm of spring. The child opens his eyes and immediately giggles, which is alarming. Even Apollo, who normally claims to be the most beautiful of the gods, pauses and nods in silent respect. "Okay," he mutters. "That's a pretty spectacular baby." The child blinks up at the pantheon. "Name?" Athena prompts. Zeus, breathing heavily and now sporting a conspicuous scar, whispers, "Dionysus." You're not sure if the name means joy, frenzy, or something lost in translation. Possibly all three. But not everyone is cooing. Hera has not forgotten. And now that the baby is out in the open, well, the game is back on. She doesn't storm in immediately. That's not her style. She waits. She watches. She plots. Zeus, exhausted and increasingly aware that this new god may not be safe here, does something rare. He admits he needs help. So, naturally, he calls Hermes. Hermes, the messenger god, part-time thief, and full-time problem solver, zips in like a breeze through laurel leaves. "Let me guess," he says, taking one look at the infant wrapped in purple mist. "You want me to stash the wine, baby?" Zeus nods. "All right," Hermes sighs. "But I'm not changing any divine diapers." And just like that, baby Dionysus is spirited away. The official records are vague about where Hermes takes him first. Some say he's handed off to a nymph named Nyssa, whose name conveniently sounds like the root of Dionysus. Others claim he was raised in a secret valley, shielded from Hera by spells and wine fumes. There's even a version where he's briefly turned into a goat. Don't ask. Mythology is weird like that. One fringe version, found scribbled on the back of a weather-worn papyrus, insists Dionysus was hidden in India for a time, learning secrets from tigers and rivers. Historians still argue whether this was an early hint of cultural fusion or just ancient fanfiction. Regardless, what's clear is this: Zeus didn't just tuck him into a cloud and hope for the best. He engineered a full-on vanishing act. You follow Hermes through 1,000 hidden paths, ducking under ivy, dodging dryads, and gliding past ancient olive trees that whisper in your ear. And finally, in a cave shaded by pines and moss, the baby is laid down in a cradle woven from vines. And that, for a brief moment, is that. Dionysus, god of wine, madness, theater, and transformation, sleeps peacefully, swaddled in mystery. But don't relax too much, because this is Greek mythology, and peace never lasts long. You barely close your eyes, just a blink, really, before everything starts unraveling again. Somewhere in the folds of Olympus, Hera's eyes snap open. She may not know where the baby has gone, but she knows he's not gone far enough. And you know that look. That quiet, icy composure that makes even Poseidon take a coffee break somewhere underwater. Hera isn't yelling yet, but something in the air shifts, thickens like honey left too long in the sun. You wake with a stretch, blink through the shadows of the cave where Dionysus is nestled, and notice it's quieter than it should be. The satyrs haven't shown up to babble nonsense. No woodland creature has pranced in with an offering of grapes. Even the nymphs seem to be holding their breath. It's because they've all heard the whisper, Hera knows. And Hera never lets go. Zeus might be the king of gods, but when it comes to vengeance, Hera is the patron saint of playing the long game. So she starts to tighten her net, not with thunder or fire, but with a careful placement of rumors, nightmares, and one very well-placed curse. Now, we should pause here for a moment, because this next bit, it's where the story really starts to get fuzzy. Historians still argue whether what follows was metaphor, madness, or a narrative imported from older Eastern cults. But one thing's clear: Dionysus does not grow up like a normal god. Let's zoom in. You're crouching behind a myrtle bush now, peeking into a different cave. Not the cozy vine-hung cradle from earlier. No, this one pulses with weirdness. The baby has changed. Or maybe there have been several babies? Some versions say Dionysus is born twice. Others claim thrice. There's even a fringe theory that he died and was reborn again before even reaching adulthood, which honestly feels excessive for anyone who can't yet walk. What we do know is that Dionysus was passed from one caregiver to another like a mythical hot potato. After Hermes, he may have gone to Ino, Semele's sister, who tried to raise him disguised as a girl to throw Hera off. That worked about as well as you'd expect. Hera finds them. Naturally, Ino's home is soon wrapped in madness. Her husband, Athamas, is cursed into thinking his own sons are dear and, well, let's just say the family portraits get awkward after that. Dionysus? Bared. Again. Whisked away by divine intervention. Spirited off to yet another hiding place. And this is where the really strange stuff begins. You follow him now through fog-soaked hills and wine-drenched meadows, as he bounces from sanctuary to sanctuary. He's always one step ahead of Hera, always just out of reach. And wherever he goes, something begins to spread. Wildness. Not just chaos, but the kind of ecstatic, joyful, slightly unhinged energy that turns normal people into barefoot dancers under the moon. Even as a child, Dionysus leaves a mark. Cattle start walking in circles. Grapevines bloom in winter. A shepherd dreams of a golden panther and wakes up drunk. In the margins of history, you can almost see the ripples. The formation of the Thyasos, the sacred band of followers who will one day worship him not with sermons, but with ecstatic abandon. But it's not all parties and mirth. You can see it in his eyes, even as a child. There's a flicker, a darkness, a weight. He's divine, yes, but also rootless. Rejected by Olympus. Hunted by his own stepmother. Raised in fragments. At some point, the child begins to question what he is. And in myths, that's dangerous. You curl up now beside a quiet pond, where Dionysus, maybe 10 years old, maybe timeless, sits skipping stones that turn into frogs mid-air. He stares into the water, and his reflection keeps shifting. Sometimes it's a boy, sometimes a man, sometimes a beast with ivy in its hair and laughter in its fangs. He doesn't laugh. Not yet. You get the sense that Hera hasn't given up. She's watching still, like a distant thundercloud. And in a desperate attempt to shake her off once and for all, Dionysus begins to walk. Not just a stroll through the woods, but a full departure. From Greece, from Olympus, from identity itself. Some say he heads east, into Phrygia, Lydia, even India. Others claim he dissolves into madness, becoming a wandering spirit who wears many masks. Either way, you follow. Step by step, the forest thins. The air gets hotter. You cross borders no map can trace. Just feelings, colors, smells. Dionysus is older now. Teenaged, maybe. Or ancient, depending on the moonlight. He moves like someone searching for something. Answers, maybe. Or just a way to be seen. And here, in this wilderness between stories, something clicks. Dionysus starts to shift. His walk grows looser. He hums to himself. Vines sprout in his wake. The madness that plagued him turns, gently, into joy. The god of wine is not born in a cradle or from a thigh. He's born in exile. He's born in motion. And you, ever the silent witness, keep walking with him into the strange, swirling dusk of identity, transformation, and the question that still hangs over all of Olympus. What do we do with a god who doesn't fit? By now, you've stopped trying to pin down Dionysus's age, or even his appearance. Sometimes he walks barefoot, cloaked in panther skins, his hair wild with ivy. Other times he wears fine robes and speaks with a foreign accent, like he's just stepped out of a temple halfway across the world. He changes constantly, not out of deception, but because he can't not. Change is his native language. And the strangest part? You begin to feel it too. As you follow him farther east, the boundaries start to blur. Mountains shift. Rivers hum in a language you don't understand. The air smells of spices and sweet rot, decay and rebirth, the signature perfume of gods on the edge of civilization. Somewhere in Phrygia, the goddess Cybele greets Dionysus. She's a wild one too, all lions and ecstatic rites. She sees the boy, this misfit divinity, and nods. She doesn't try to tame him. Instead, she offers him something he never quite had on Olympus. Ritual. Not pomp, not hierarchy, ritual. Dancing barefoot. Music that tears through your spine. Followers who surrender reason in exchange for something wilder. You lie on the soft earth and watch. At first, it seems chaotic. Drums pounding, flute screeching, women in trance states tearing through vines like thunder. But look closer, and you see the pattern. The rhythm beneath the noise. Dionysus isn't leading them. He's moving with them. Not a king, not a priest. Something looser, something deeper. A god born of rupture, finally learning how to rupture things on purpose. From here, his legend grows, not by decree, but by echo. He moves from city to city, mountain to mountain. Each place gives him a new name, a new story. Bacchus, Iacchus, Liber. In one village, he brings wine. In another, he teaches song. In a third, he just sits under a fig tree until the townspeople start seeing visions. The weird thing, wherever he goes, people follow. Not because they're forced, but because they want to. This is not the kind of worship Olympus approves of. No golden temples. No stiff offerings in marble bowls. This is madness as medicine. Grief turned into laughter. The kind of wild joy that scares polite society. It scares you too, if you're honest. Because at some point, you notice the shadows behind the joy. Not everyone dances for fun. Some are weeping as they twirl. Some laugh so hard they shake. And when night falls, you hear the moans of pain, of release, of transformation. Dionysus doesn't shy from it. He leans in. He embraces contradiction, laughter and sorrow, wine and blood, life and death. Historians still argue whether Dionysus represents liberation or delusion. But you see both. Clearly. One night, deep in a valley where no map dares go, you watch as he touches a dying tree, and it blossoms. In another moment, he turns a dried-up spring into wine with a flick of his fingers. His miracles are small, intimate, nothing like the thunderbolts of Zeus or the perfect geometry of Athena's plans. But they ripple wider, and the gods begin to notice. Back on Olympus, whispers are rising again. Dionysus has been gone a long time, but his name keeps popping up, on mortal lips, in frenzied prayers, in strange offerings left on the edge of traditional altars. Ivy is starting to creep up the columns of temples dedicated to other gods. Even Hera, who has long since cooled her rage into a low-burning distaste, lifts an eyebrow. "Still alive," she mutters. Still everywhere, someone replies. Now here's a little fringe tidbit the older poets like to insert, just to make things spicy. Some said that by traveling so far and wide, Dionysus not only escaped Hera's wrath, he outgrew it. That she, the queen of Olympus, simply became irrelevant to him. And that was her real punishment. You're not sure if that's true, but it feels true. Because Dionysus no longer hides. He no longer shifts in fear. He owns his weirdness. He names it divine. And his following grows. But not without cost. There's a city, one night, where the locals mock him. Call him a fraud. A boy in a dress. A foreigner peddling madness. Dionysus doesn't rage. He doesn't argue. He simply walks to the edge of town and smiles. Within hours, the vineyards twist into strange shapes. Goats walk backwards. The town's well fills with wine, then blood, then wine again. By morning, half the town believes. The other half runs screaming. That, right there, is the magic of Dionysus. He doesn't convince you. He overwhelms you. Not through reason, but through sheer sensory overload. The same way dreams convince you things make sense until you wake up. And you're somewhere between sleep and wakefulness now. Not sure if your feet are touching ground anymore. Not sure if this is a myth or just the way the world's always been. But Dionysus keeps walking. And you follow. Because, for better or worse, he is the god who doesn't abandon the broken parts of you. He dances with them. He pours them a drink. He says, yes, even that is divine. And in a world of gods who demand perfection, that might be the most sacred thing of all. By now, you're beginning to understand. Dionysus isn't a god you pray to. He's a god you become. Not in a literal sense, unless you're particularly talented at shape-shifting, but in that deep, shivering part of the soul where control gives way to release. That's where he lives. You've been walking with him for what feels like centuries, through valleys that bloom with grapes overnight, across mountain passes echoing with flute songs, into villages where the women abandon their weaving and take to the hills, eyes glazed with something between ecstasy and revelation. And all the while, tucked just behind Dionysus's lips, is a secret. Because you remember, don't you? He wasn't born the usual way. He was torn from one mother, sewn into the flesh of his father, then born again, not out of joy, but out of necessity. A divine stitched job. And deep down, he remembers that strangeness, that patchwork beginning. And strange gods raise strange questions. Who raises a child like that? Olympus couldn't. Earth tried. But somewhere in between, a new idea of parenting emerged. A community of outcasts, half-wild creatures, women with stories stitched into their skins, old men who talked to vines. They raised him not with discipline, but with dance. Not with order, but with stories that made no sense until you felt them in your bones. It's in that world that Dionysus grows. Not taller, not older, but deeper. His presence expands like spilled wine. Messy, staining, impossible to reverse. And then, just when things are finally beginning to settle, the gods intervene. Not Hera this time. She's learned to bide her time. No, it's the rest of Olympus that starts to get antsy. Because Dionysus isn't just a weird traveler anymore. He's building something. A following. At the edges of established religion, his cult starts to formalize. Not in marble and doctrine, but in song, trance, rhythm, and ritual madness. The Thyasos, his sacred retinue, takes shape. Maenads, women possessed by divine frenzy, whirl barefoot through forests. Satyrs and Sileni pound on drums with animal joy. It's half party, half exorcism. You can't tell where one ends and the other begins. And you're no longer a quiet observer. You're being pulled in. It begins subtly. You tap your foot when the drums start. You sway, just a little, when the flute wails. You laugh too hard at a joke that isn't funny, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you realize you're not entirely you anymore. At least not the version of you who started the story. It's not possession. It's not madness. It's permission to break, to dance without knowing why, to laugh and weep without explaining yourself. You're not alone. That's the scariest part. Around you, others are giving in too. The carpenter's wife drops her spindle and begins to hum. The local priest, once so stern, now rocks back and forth like a reed in wind. Even the skeptics, the ones who said Dionysus was just a rumor, begin to dream strange dreams. And Dionysus himself? He barely notices. Or rather, he does, but not in the way you expect. He doesn't crown himself king or demand worship. He just smiles and moves on, leaving behind cracked amphorae, lush vineyards, and a sense that something essential just slipped through your fingers. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. Because while mortals are quick to dance, they're even quicker to fear what they don't understand. In some towns, Dionysus is welcomed. In others, he's driven out. Priests denounce him. Leaders call his rites dangerous. Madness, they say, is not divine, not respectable. One myth tells of a king named Pentheus, ruler of Thebes, ironically the very city of Dionysus's mortal birth. Pentheus hears of the gods' growing influence and scoffs. He sees only danger in a cult of women dancing on mountaintops, losing themselves in divine frenzy. So he does what rational men do when they don't understand something. He tries to control it. Bad idea. But we're not there yet. You're still in the lull before the storm, lounging by a stream with a half-drunk satyr who insists that fish can sing if you hum the right melody. You try. The fish ignore you. This is the world Dionysus has built. One foot in reality, the other in dream. Historians still argue whether the cult of Dionysus was a response to the rigid order of polis life or a remnant of older, pre-Olympian mystery religions. Either way, it works. It spreads. And for many, it heals. And for others, it terrifies. You sip from a wineskin passed around by strangers who feel more like family now. You hear stories of cities that tried to ban Dionysus, only to see their vineyards wither, their people go silent. You hear whispers that Dionysus doesn't punish directly. He lets the madness come on its own, like a fever ignored. But more than anything, you hear laughter. The kind of laughter that comes after grief. The kind of laughter that shakes dust off the soul. And in that sound, you hear the true nature of Dionysus. Not as a destroyer, not as a trickster, but as something far more dangerous. A liberator. He doesn't demand worship. He offers freedom. And once you've tasted that, you'll never go back. It happens on the edge of morning, when the dew still clings to the grass and the sky is caught between lavender and pale gold. You're somewhere in the hills of Lydia now, lying beside a fire that's burned low. Dionysus sits nearby, silent for once, staring into the coals like they might speak. Around you, the last of the dancers are dozing, their limbs tangled in ivy and each other. And then it begins. You hear it first. Not a roar, not a scream, but a low murmur. Like someone has whispered a truth too strange to ignore. Dionysus doesn't move, but you feel him shift internally, like a tide changing its mind. Because today, he's being born again. Yes, again. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and remember, this is a god born from fire, then flesh, then exile. Nothing about him is ever final. Birth, for Dionysus, is a cycle, a shedding of skin, a reinvention. And today marks the next spiral in that divine loop. He stands slowly, brushing ash from his robes. And when he turns to you, his eyes are different, deeper, sadder, clearer. You get the sense he's remembered something he'd rather forget. But instead of hiding it, he wears it. He's grown. Not in height, but in weight, the weight of someone who's seen what joy costs. And with that, the camp begins to stir. The satyrs wake first, stretching with comically long yawns. The maenads, still half in trance, begin to hum. One of them braids her hair with a twig that starts to sprout tiny leaves. A sign. A message. The god is changing, so the world must too. You pack up your things, though really you never had any, and fall in behind him as the procession begins. It's not a parade. Not yet. It's quiet, focused, like something sacred is brewing under the surface. Because this next part? It's where things get official. You arrive at a small town by mid-afternoon. Nothing fancy. Olive trees, goats, a handful of dusty shrines. And yet, word has already spread. The strange god is coming, and with him comes a feeling. The villagers gather hesitantly. Some are curious, some suspicious. A few are already swaying to a beat they can't quite hear. And Dionysus? He does nothing at first. Just sits beneath a fig tree and watches. Then someone offers him wine. Not much. Just a rough clay jug passed with both hands. He takes it, nods, drinks, and smiles. That's all it takes. The air shifts. Music begins. Not from any visible instrument, but from the very earth. Drums in the dust. Flutes in the wind. The vines around the fig tree twist upward like snakes, blooming instantly. Someone gasps. Another begins to dance. And the festival begins. Not a planned event. No speeches. No processions. Just release. Relief. Laughter bubbling up from somewhere ancient. And you dance. Not well. You trip over a sleeping goat and elbow a satyr in the ribs. But it doesn't matter. Dionysus watches and laughs. A real laugh, from the belly. And in that moment, you realize, he sees all of you. The mess, the beauty, the contradiction. And he doesn't turn away. It's no wonder people started building cults around him. Not out of fear, not out of duty, but because he gave them permission to feel, to break, to rebuild. One strange historical tidbit that survives from this era is the use of masking in Dionysian rites. Participants would wear faces not their own, grotesque, joyful, sorrowful, and in doing so, they'd release something deep inside. Historians still argue whether this was meant to summon spirits or suppress inhibitions. But one thing is certain, under the mask, people became free. And masks, as you'll learn, are sacred to Dionysus. Because when you wear one, you're not hiding, you're becoming. That night, the village is transformed. Olive oil runs like honey. Songs echo until the stars seem to shimmer in rhythm. A child declares herself a priestess. A widow sings for the first time in years. But not everyone joins. From the shadows, a few watch with narrowed eyes. Local officials, town elders, men who mutter about proper rituals and stability. You recognize them, even in ancient clothes. The ones who fear what they can't catalog, who equate control with goodness, who see freedom and assume danger. And they're not entirely wrong, because Dionysus is dangerous. Not in the way of swords and storms, but in the way that truth is dangerous. He shows people who they really are. And not everyone can bear it. By dawn, the village is changed. Some will remember the night as magic. Others will call it madness. But none will deny it happened. And Dionysus? Gone again. Off into the hills, into myth, into another version of himself. You find yourself trailing behind, barefoot now, hair tangled, heart oddly light. You're not the same either. You've seen too much, felt too much. He pauses, once, at the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea, turns to you, and winks. Because even gods know when they've made a believer. You wake to the sound of bleating goats and a satyr snoring loudly into a wineskin. The sun's up, spilling soft golden light over the hillside. Dionysus is gone again, but you know better now. He's never far. He's the rustle in the leaves, the sting of wine on an empty stomach, the itch in your feet when a flute starts up. Today, you're with a new group. Nymphs you've never seen before, their hair full of leaves. A few old women who laugh like they've remembered something wicked. One carries a drum. Another wears a fox mask with no eye holes. They're on the move. You're not sure where or why, but that's become familiar. With Dionysus, direction is optional. You just follow the pull. The trail takes you deeper into the mountains this time. Rocky switchbacks, caves that breathe cool air. You pass an old olive grove where vines now choke the trees, heavy with purple fruit that wasn't there last week. And then, nestled in a glade, you find it, the cave. This is not the first cave you've seen, but something about this one is different. The air is thick, not with danger, but with memory. The walls glisten with trickling water. Someone's humming a tune you somehow already know. Inside, on a bed of moss, lies Dionysus. He's asleep, and not the kind of sleep you saw back in the village. Wine-drowsy and sprawled. No, this is a deeper rest. The kind of sleep that only gods take after burning too brightly for too long. He looks peaceful, younger somehow, and though he doesn't open his eyes, you know he knows you're there. You settle beside him, careful not to disturb the ivy creeping slowly across the stone. Around you, the others do the same. No words, just silence, reverence, not worship, but recognition. This, you understand, is a moment between movements, because even gods who thrive on ecstasy need stillness. In myths, these moments are often skipped. The stories leap from miracle to madness, skipping over the part where the god rests, where the followers catch their breath. But it matters. You hear a soft voice from a nymph beside you. "This is the third time," she whispers. "He's slept like this before. Each time, he comes back a little changed." That's the thing with Dionysus. He's always shifting, never settling. Some scholars say he absorbed fragments of older deities, that he's part Orphic, part Phrygian, maybe even pre-Greek. Historians still argue whether the Greeks adopted him reluctantly, forcing him to earn his seat on Olympus through sheer cultural persistence. But here, none of that matters. He's not a myth. He's someone you know. You sit with him as the hours pass. A satyr brings figs. Someone plays a soft rhythm on the drum. The cave becomes less a shelter and more a womb, a place between endings and beginnings. And as the day deepens, something stirs. Not Dionysus. Not yet. You feel it in your breath, in your chest. That looseness, that space where something heavy used to live. It's gone. Or maybe it's transformed. You can't quite say. And then, as twilight settles over the cave, he opens his eyes. No drama. No trumpet blast. Just a slow, deep breath, like someone waking not from sleep, but from another life entirely. He sits up, rubs his eyes, and smiles at nothing in particular. "Where were we?" he says, voice hoarse like thunder wrapped in silk. The others laugh softly, as if on cue. You laugh too. Because of course he wouldn't remember. Or maybe he remembers everything, and it just doesn't matter. He stands, stretches, and the vines on the walls respond. Leaves curl, grapes plump. The cave exudes a heady sweetness. The revival has begun. There's a lightness to him now, a new note in his voice, a sharper gleam in his eyes. Not joy exactly, something after joy, a steadiness, a clarity. He starts humming, a simple tune, catchy in that ancient, unforgettable way. You hum along. One by one, the others do too. And then you're outside again, walking. No destination, just the rhythm. This is the magic of Dionysus reborn. Not spectacle, but contagion. He infects the world with meaning, even in silence, even in the cracks. You reach a hilltop by nightfall. The stars come out, reluctant at first, then all at once. Someone builds a small fire. Someone else starts dancing. Not wildly, just gently. You feel your body follow. Dionysus sits on a boulder, sipping from a cup, watching. Not with authority, with curiosity, like he's seeing the world for the first time. Again, and you realize he is. Every time he sleeps and wakes, it's a reset, a recalibration, a new version of a god who never stops changing. Born of fire, sown into flesh, raised in shadow, now reborn through stillness. He looks at you. You meet his gaze. And in that gaze you feel it. Acceptance. Not for your perfection, for your imperfection. For all the parts you hide from polite company. The parts that laugh too loudly, that cry too easily, that dream too wildly. He sees them all, and loves them. You wake to the sound of flutes again, but this time, they're playing a melody you don't recognize. It skips and twirls like it's trying to lead your thoughts somewhere unfamiliar. And as your eyes adjust to the morning light, you realize you're no longer in the cave or on the hillside. You're in a forest, and it's laughing. Yes, the trees sway as though sharing a joke with the wind. A stream gurgles in a rhythm suspiciously like applause. Somewhere nearby, a goat brays, then stops abruptly, as if embarrassed. And there, at the heart of it all, is Dionysus. Older again, though he still wears youth like a costume. His hair is tangled with grape leaves, his cheeks are flushed, and he's holding a drinking horn the size of your torso. "Breakfast?" he asks, raising it casually. You've long stopped asking what's in the cup. Wine, probably. Maybe honeyed dreams. Possibly seawater with opinions. It doesn't matter. You sip. It burns a little, then tickles, then warms something deep in your spine. Today, you're helping raise a child god again. Not with lullabies or scrolls, but with revelry. Because Dionysus may be reborn, but he's still growing, still exploring the shape of his divinity. And like any divine toddler, he tests boundaries by flipping them over and turning them into music. The nymphs and satyrs have gathered for what they call a lesson. You assume philosophy or etiquette. You're wrong. The lesson is how to make fermented grape mash using your feet. It's stickier than you'd like. Your toes stain purple. A satyr falls into the vat. A nymph laughs so hard she snorts wine. Dionysus claps like a proud parent. Don't forget, he says, the best wine always has a little chaos in it. You're not sure if that's true or just a metaphor for his entire existence. But the act of making wine, truly making it, grounds you. You feel the squish of the grapes underfoot. You smell the sharp tang of fermentation. It's slow, messy, sacred. Because here's the thing. For Dionysus, wine isn't about luxury. It's about ritual. It's a sacrament disguised as a party favor. The line between holy and ridiculous? Intentionally blurred. Some scholars believe the earliest Dionysian rites were centered on wine production. Not just the drinking, but the making. A community affair. A seasonal miracle. Historians still argue whether these rituals were agricultural in origin or spiritual expressions masked by viticulture. But in this forest, it's both. Because you can feel it as the mash bubbles, as the vines creep closer, as the satyrs start a harmony that is absolutely off-key but somehow beautiful. You feel the god in the process, not above it, inside it. Even the goats get involved. One nudges your elbow with its head until you feed it a figure. Another starts bleating rhythmically, and the satyrs attempt to incorporate it into a drumbeat. You try not to laugh, but you fail. Dionysus grins at you like you've just passed a secret test. You're starting to understand, he says. Understand what? You ask, wiping grape skins off your ankle. That madness isn't the opposite of reason. It's the door behind it. You think about that as the day wears on, as the wine begins to flow, as the laughter grows louder, looser. You think about the ways people hide from themselves, from each other, and how Dionysus, with his wild smile and soft eyes, peels those masks away. By sunset, the forest is singing. No lyrics, just sound, pure, uninhibited sound. And you're part of it. Someone hands you a pipe made from hollowed-out reed. You don't know how to play it. You play anyway. It squeaks. You keep going. No one laughs. Or rather, they do, but it's the warm kind. The kind that invites you in. And Dionysus? He dances. Not center stage. Not demanding attention. Just moving. Fluid. Joyful. He spins with a satyr, then twirls a nymph until she collapses giggling into a pile of leaves. He hoists a goat onto his shoulders and parades it around like a trophy. And you see it again, that shimmer. Not literal, not divine light or glowing halos. Just something, a truth, that the sacred isn't always solemn, that gods can laugh. And you laugh too. You laugh until your sides ache, until your knees give out, until you're flat on your back staring at stars that seem too close. One of them winks. You're pretty sure it's real. The night stretches on, soft and slow. No pressure to be anything but what you are. No expectations. Just breath and presence. At one point, Dionysus lies beside you, arms behind his head. Why do people take God so seriously? He asks. You don't know how to answer. He doesn't wait. We're just stories people told to make the pain beautiful. And then he yawns and falls asleep. Just like that. And you stay awake a little longer, listening to the forest breathe. It starts with a headache. Not yours. Dionysus's. You notice it when he rubs his temples after laughing too hard at a satyr's attempt to juggle figs and catch them with his mouth. He smiles, but it doesn't quite reach his eyes. The music fades. The nymphs keep dancing, but Dionysus slips away from the circle, quiet as a breeze. You follow. He walks deep into the trees, past twisted oaks and whispering streams. The deeper he goes, the darker it gets, not in light, but in feeling. The joy from earlier lingers behind like smoke after fire. When he finally stops, he sits on a stone and exhales like he's been holding his breath for centuries. Sometimes, he says softly, the laughter doesn't land. You sit beside him. You don't say anything. He doesn't need advice. He needs someone who doesn't flinch when the mask slips. And it does slip. Because here's the part they don't always tell you in the wine-drenched celebrations and ivy-crowned parades. Dionysus is also the god of madness. Not just frenzy. Not just dance until you drop ecstasy. Real, untamed madness. The kind that whispers when the party's over and everyone's gone home. The kind that curls up in your chest when you laugh too hard and then cry without warning. He touches his chest. It's like a pressure. Building. Always. You nod. He looks at you. They think I'm just joy. Wine. Revels. But it's not all joy. It never was. You remember what he was born into. Flames. Grief. Confusion. Raised in exile. Doubted. Disguised. Abandoned. Even gods carry trauma. And he carries it beautifully. You think about the Maenads, those wild women who follow him. They're not just drunk dancers in the woods. They're women who left everything behind. Homes, names, expectations. Some fled grief. Some rage. Some ran from silence too heavy to bear. Dionysus doesn't ask questions. He just lets them be. That's his real power. Permission. He doesn't fix people. He tells them they don't need to be fixed. And for some, that's salvation. For others, it's terrifying. You've seen it yourself. In the towns you've passed through. How some embrace the madness, and others call it heresy. How some find healing in chaos, while others cling tighter to their rules and walls. Historians still argue whether Dionysus represented psychological liberation or spiritual surrender. The truth, as always, is both. A goat wanders up to him now, nuzzles his side. He smiles faintly, scratches behind its ear. I tried to be quiet once, he says. Tried to blend in. Be like them. Didn't work. You ask. He snorts. They noticed anyway. People always notice when something doesn't fit. And that is the ache. Because even gods get lonely. Not for followers. He has plenty. Not for worship. That's not really his thing. But for understanding. You stay there in silence for a long time. The wind rustles the trees. Somewhere in the distance, someone starts a gentle song on a reed flute. The kind that doesn't demand attention. It just drifts. Eventually, Dionysus stands. He doesn't announce anything. He doesn't throw lightning or summon vines. He just brushes the moss from his legs and walks back toward the others. But something's different. His steps are slower. Not weary. Intentional. Because sometimes, even the god of frenzy needs to teach stillness. Back at camp, the satyrs are mid-debate about whether wine tastes better when drunk upside down. A nymph is braiding grapevines into a crown shaped like a snail. You slip into the group without fanfare. Dionysus doesn't say much, but he sits close, and the music shifts. Softer now, deeper, less about celebration, more about catharsis. The kind of music that understands your sadness without trying to fix it. That night, the stories flow, slowly, like honey on a cool plate. One by one, people share. A satyr talks about a friend he lost to winter. A Maenad whispers about a life she left behind. Even a tree, yes, the tree, shares something. You don't speak its language, but you feel it. Dionysus listens. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't try to make it better. He just listens. And when the last story is told, he lifts his cup, not in toast, but in honor. To all that breaks, he says, and all that grows in the cracks. You drink. Tastes like understanding. And you know now, without doubt, Dionysus isn't just the god of madness. He's the god who walks beside you through it. Not to drag you out, but to remind you that even the strangest parts of you are worthy of love. The air smells like dust and citrus. You're walking beside Dionysus now. No drums, no laughter, just the steady rhythm of sandals against sand. The wild forests and mountain glades are behind you. Ahead lies something new. Cities. Real ones. With gates and rules and guards who ask too many questions. He doesn't wear his crown of ivy today. No leopard skin. Just a plain robe, dusty at the hem. He walks like a man with no particular destination. But you know better. He always knows where he's going. He just refuses to walk there like he owns the place. Today's destination is a city where no one knows his name. At least, not yet. The city is dry, sun-bleached, suspicious. The locals watch you as you enter, eyes narrowed, hands hovering near tools, as if you're carrying something contagious. You are. The madness is quiet right now, sleeping in Dionysus's shadow. But it stirs occasionally, like a cat under a blanket, and people feel it. Even if they can't name it. He heads straight for the marketplace. No ceremony, just presence. He speaks with the spice vendors, laughs with the olive seller, tries on a cloak he clearly doesn't intend to buy. A child offers him a date, sticky and sweet. He bows with exaggerated grace. "Your Majesty," he tells the child. And the child giggles, not knowing how close to truth they are. Word starts to spread, as it always does. There's a stranger in the square. His eyes shine too bright. The air around him smells like crushed leaves and something older. The street dogs follow him. So do the outcasts, the drunk, the dreamers, the ones who mutter to themselves. They gather, and by evening, there's a crowd. No stage, no altar, just Dionysus sitting on a low wall, sharing bread and wine, telling stories. But this time, the stories aren't about gods or monsters. They're about people. He tells of a woman who ran into the forest and found her name, of a boy who sang to trees until they sang back, of a man who built a house of silence and then laughed so hard it fell down. And the people listen, not like followers, like humans desperate for something real. Then the officials come, because they always do. They've heard the stories. They've seen the people drifting towards something they can't control. And they don't like it. Too much laughter in the wrong part of town. Too many songs sung by mouths that used to stay quiet. Dionysus turns to you as they approach. "Want to see a trick?" You nod. "Of course you do." He stands, dusts off his robe, and greets the guards with a grin that could disarm a warhorse. "I'm just a storyteller," he says. "A disturber of the peace," they reply. He tilts his head. "Peace is a story too." The guards hesitate. Something's wrong. Their spears feel heavier. Their boots stick slightly to the ground. One looks down and sees the stone beneath his feet has sprouted moss. "Is that?" he mutters. Too late. The square begins to shift. Not violently, subtly. The fountain overflows with wine. The air grows thick with music, though no instruments are visible. Ivy crawls up walls that haven't seen green in decades. The sun seems amused. And the people, they laugh at nothing and everything. They twirl. They weep. They kiss. They dance barefoot on cobblestones. And in that moment, the city becomes something else. Not a place of control, but of becoming. Dionysus raises a cup, no idea where he got it, and shouts, "To joy that ruins the plans of small men." The crowd roars. The guards flee. And just like that, the miracle is over. The next morning, the city tries to pretend it didn't happen. They scrub the vines off the statues. They drain the fountain. They arrest a satyr who was too slow to leave. But you know better. You saw it. So did they. And you understand now. Dionysus doesn't need temples. He doesn't need titles. He just needs a crack. A moment. A sliver of doubt in the mortar of certainty. And through that crack he pours. This is how his following grows. Not by conquest, but by leakage. He drips into places. Into people. One sip. One laugh. One tear too many. And once he's in, you don't forget him. He doesn't let you. Later that night, you and he walk along the outskirts of the city. The moon is low, buttery and slow. "Do they hate me?" he asks. "No," you say. "They fear what they can't hold." He nods. "They think madness is the enemy." And it isn't. He smiles, sadly. It's the price of remembering who you really are. You walk in silence after that, the city shrinking behind you, the stars sharpening above. You don't look back. Neither does he. You know it's going to be one of those days when the sea smells like wine. Not metaphorically. Literally. You're aboard a small merchant ship, somewhere off the Aegean coast. The sun's up, the sails are full, and the crew is deeply suspicious of their newest passenger, your friend Dionysus, who offered them figs in silence and paid for passage with a handful of ivy leaves that turned to gold and back again when no one was looking. You're lounging beside a crate of olives, chewing lazily and watching Dionysus hum to himself as he stares out over the water. He's barefoot, he's grinning, and he's absolutely up to something. You see, this is a story that gets told a lot, in many ways. Sometimes as a cautionary tale, sometimes as a miracle, but always with the same beginning. A band of pirates sees a soft-looking stranger alone on the shore. They offer him help. He accepts. And the moment they set sail, they decide to sell him into slavery. Because why not? He's young, pretty, doesn't look like he owns much. And people like that, people who don't fit, are easy to exploit. Except of course that stranger is Dionysus. And you, reclining behind a barrel, are the only one on board who knows. The pirates whisper about where they'll sell him. You hear the names of distant ports, hard coins, and easy profit. Dionysus says nothing, just watches the waves. Then things get weird. First, the ropes tying the sails begin to twist, gently, like they're stretching after a nap. The wood of the mast creaks, not from age, but from growth. Leaves unfurl from knots. Grapevines snake upward. The pirates don't notice right away. They're too busy laughing, passing flasks, imagining how they'll spend their silver. Then one turns to look at Dionysus, and finds a tiger where a boy had been. Not a metaphor. A full-sized, amber-eyed tiger, lounging on the deck like it owns the ship. There's a beat of silence. Then all chaos breaks loose. Men stumble backward. One dives into the sea. Another swings a sword that instantly turns into a stick of incense. A third bursts into laughter and can't stop. You stay where you are. Not because you're brave. Because you know this is a show. A lesson. And Dionysus teaches in strange ways. Then comes the sound. Flutes. Sharp. High. Swirling like a windstorm made of music. You look up and see the sails sagging under the weight of ivy. The ship smells like myrrh and fermentation. Birds circle overhead, calling out in patterns that feel like speech. And then, one by one, the pirates begin to change. Some turn into dolphins, sleek, gray, suddenly free. They vanish into the sea, leaping joyfully. Others drop to their knees, weeping, overcome with something they don't understand. Dionysus, now human again, now divine again, it's hard to tell, stands calmly amid the chaos. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply says, "Never mistake softness for weakness." And just like that, the spell lifts. The ship is intact. The crew is gone. You're drifting alone with a god who wears madness like perfume. He sits beside you, offers you a fig. You chew slowly. It's perfect. This story is one of the oldest we have of Dionysus. And historians love it, of course. They debate whether it originated in the Greek Isles or borrowed from older Eastern myths of shape-shifting deities and oceanic justice. Some even argue the dolphin motif hints at ancient maritime cults. Fringe theorists insist the ship itself represents the human soul, overwhelmed by what it cannot categorize. But you were there. You saw the tiger grin. You saw how quickly the world turns when it meets something it cannot define. Dionysus leans back, hands behind his head. People always think gods are about rules, he says. That we keep things in order. He gestures at the empty sea, the wine-soaked sails, the humming air. I prefer invitation. To what? He closes his eyes. To unmaking. And you think about that. About how every system needs a breaker. How every myth needs a trickster, a chaos bringer, a mirror held up to the face of control. You watch the horizon ripple. And you wonder, how many gods were really just people who made the wrong rulers nervous? By sundown, you dock in a quiet bay. No one there to greet you. No signs of what came before. Just a soft beach, a waiting forest, and a god who turns his face to the stars like he's listening for applause. You walk behind him again, barefoot in the sand, and the sea somewhere behind you laughs. By now, you've seen Dionysus perform more miracles than you can count, and none of them the same way twice. He doesn't deal in patterns. He doesn't repeat himself. He reveals truths by flipping the world inside out. But even gods must return home eventually. And this homecoming isn't gentle. You cross back into Thebes under a brooding sky. The streets are familiar, narrow, sun-baked, lined with fig trees that seem more subdued than you remember. This is the city where Semele once lived, where her ashes still whisper in the corners of forgotten courtyards, where no one speaks her name anymore. And Dionysus? He's not laughing. Not yet. He walks with purpose now. Not fury, not vengeance, but something quieter, older, like a wave that circled the earth and finally found its shore. Thebes doesn't know he's here, but they will. You learn quickly that things have changed. A new king rules, Pentheus, Semele's nephew, young, rigid, obsessed with control. He's outlawed Dionysus worship, declared the rituals a threat to public order. Banned drums, masks, even wine festivals. The very idea of a divine force that promotes ecstasy terrifies him. You sit in a tavern that no longer sells wine. You watch as whispers spread. He's back, someone mutters. The god with ivy in his hair. The fear is almost tangible. But Dionysus? He doesn't announce himself. He performs. Quietly at first. A statue weeps grape juice. A field of barley bursts into bloom. A local woman dreams of dancing and wakes with leaves braided into her hair. The people remember, and they begin to gather. At night, they sneak out of the city, climbing into the mountains where the old rites are still whispered under breath. They sing. They shed their names. They become Maenads. Once more, Pentheus is livid. He paces his halls, barking orders. He sends soldiers to drag the women back. They return trembling, speaking of visions, of wild animals that bowed before them. One carries a staff that bloomed mid-battle. He blames hysteria, sorcery, but deep down, he knows it's him. The god he refused to acknowledge. The cousin he never met, born from flame and stitched into a god's thigh. Dionysus watches from the shadows. He's already inside the palace. Not physically, mythically. In the cracks. In the nervous glances. In the grapes that won't stay dry. And then, as if bored of waiting, he enters in disguise. Just a foreigner. Hair curled. Eyes too bright. Voice soft as a breeze laced with secrets. He tells Pentheus that a god is among them. That the people are dancing because their hearts remember something the king has tried to silence. Pentheus scoffs, laughs, threatens. But Dionysus, smiling politely, suggests something else. Come see for yourself, he says. Put on a dress. Hide your sword. Pretend to be one of them. See what your people really believe. It's not mockery. It's an invitation. And Pentheus, so obsessed with control, takes it. You watch with quiet horror as the king disguises himself. Robes, wig, veil. He looks absurd, but also free. For just a moment, his shoulders loosen. His mouth twitches with something like curiosity. Then he follows Dionysus into the hills. And there things unravel. You stay behind, as the myths say you must. But the wind tells the story anyway. The Maenads don't see a king. They see a threat, or a beast, or something not of this world. The frenzy rises. The masks of civility fall. And Pentheus, that boy who tried to bottle divinity, is torn apart. Not just in body, but in idea. By his own mother, they say. Driven to madness. Her mind a mirror turned inward. And Dionysus? He doesn't stop it. He lets it happen. Because gods don't always save. Sometimes they reveal. This story, Pentheus and his refusal, is one of the most famous in Dionysus's mythology. It's the backbone of the Bacchae, Euripides' haunting tragedy. Scholars still argue about its meaning. Is it a warning about repression? About the perils of denying the irrational? Or a dark celebration of divine justice? You're not sure, but you feel its truth. Because in Thebes, after the blood has dried, something shifts. The people mourn, not just for Pentheus, but for themselves, for all the parts they tried to control, for the joy they once buried, for the gods they forgot to dance for. And Dionysus? He doesn't gloat. He walks the city streets barefoot, silent. He places a flower on Semele's ruined shrine, and disappears into the night. Thebes, now awake, doesn't try to follow. It simply remembers. And you walk behind him again. The wind in your hair, the ache in your chest. No longer just a follower, but a witness to the madness that heals, and the God who lets it come. The road winds through low hills now, the kind that catch mist in the mornings and hold it like a secret. Dionysus walks ahead of you, humming a small tune, ancient and playful, half lullaby, half riddle. You've stopped asking where you're going. You just go, because wherever he walks, something changes. You've seen it again and again. A dry village where laughter returns. A cracked amphora that overflows with wine. A lonely widow who begins to sing in her sleep. And always the people follow. Not out of fear. Never fear. They follow because something inside them starts to move when Dionysus is near. Something quiet. Something wild. Something that hasn't danced in years. And now, those followers have a name. The cult of Dionysus. Don't think of marble temples or priests in stiff robes. Think instead of torchlit processions through mountain passes. Think of songs sung with trembling voices. Of painted faces. Of silence shattered by joy. They're everywhere now. From Attica to Thrace. From coastal towns to sleepy farms. They gather in secret. In caves, in forests, in the hidden places cities try to forget. They wear ivy crowns. They carry thyrsus staffs, long rods topped with pine cones, symbols of fertility and transformation. To outsiders it looks like chaos, but to them, it's home. Some are women who escaped lives that were too small for their spirits. Some are men tired of pretending to be strong all the time. Some are neither, or both. They come to lose themselves, and in doing so, find something they didn't know they were missing. And Dionysus? He walks among them, not as a ruler, as a rhythm, a spark passed from hand to hand, a laugh that catches and spreads until everyone forgets why they were frowning. One night, around a fire in Boeotia, you hear a man speak. I used to be a carpenter, he says. Then I danced. I haven't stopped since. No one asks what that means. They know. Another woman, older, her face lined by time and smoke, whispers, I only feel real when I wear the mask. You look over and see hers, made of bark and feathers, painted with tears. Masks, again. Always masks. You remember, in Dionysian rites, the mask isn't a disguise. It's a revelation. It frees the self from the burden of self. You don't pretend, you become. And that is what scares the cities. Because the cult of Dionysus isn't just a religion. It's a threat to control, to conformity, to the delicate machinery of society that depends on people staying in line, staying quiet, staying broken. The rulers whisper. They scream in the woods. The philosophers mutter. They worship madness. The priests frown. They let women lead. And still the cult grows. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's worship was a rebellion or a release valve. Was it a safe space for forbidden ecstasy, or a form of social sabotage? Did it begin with peasants, or was it imported by mystics from the East? You don't care. You're in it now. You march beside the torchbearers. You chant. You let the mask slip over your face and feel your heartbeat change. Not faster, just deeper. And in the flicker of the flames, you glimpse things. Faces. Visions. Maybe just shadows. A young girl kissing the earth. A man laughing with tears on his cheeks. A goat, just standing there, judging you. You think, this shouldn't make sense. And yet it does. Not in the way numbers make sense. In the way dreams do. Dionysus watches you from across the fire. There's no judgment in his gaze. Just a soft knowing. He's seen this before. People coming apart, then back together again, differently. In the morning, the masks are removed. The faces beneath are lighter. Not happier. Just realer. Some leave. Others stay. But all remember. That's how the cult survives. Not through monuments, but through memory. You keep moving. At a crossroads, you find an offering. Bread, wine, and a mask left on a stone. No note. Just presence. A village you pass through has painted ivy on their doorposts. Another sings your arrival before you even introduce yourselves. And always, in the corner of every gathering, there's someone new. Wide-eyed. Unsure. Ready. You don't initiate them. The god does. Sometimes with a touch. Sometimes with a question. Sometimes just with a mirror. You realize, this isn't a religion you join. It's one you recognize. Because you've already felt it. That crack in the world. That shimmer. That moment when the ordinary slips sideways and something more rushes in. That's Dionysus. Not an escape. A return. To the part of you that howls under full moons. That weeps without explanation. That dances for no one. You walk with him still, now not as a stranger, not as a guest, but as a believer. Not in a god, but in the need for him. You've seen Dionysus in many forms by now, laughing, furious, silent, radiant, but today he wears something new, stillness. He's seated beneath a fig tree on a low stone wall, robe open at the throat, fingers stained purple from crushing grapes without bothering to drink them. His gaze is soft, far away, not distracted, just waiting. You approach slowly, sensing that something has shifted. He looks up at you. They're going to invite me back, he says. You blink. Who? He smiles. The gods. And there it is. After all the wandering, the wine, the madness, the masks, Olympus is calling. Not out of generosity, out of necessity. Because Dionysus has become too large to ignore. He isn't a fringe figure anymore. He's in the dreams of generals, in the rituals of villagers, in the laughter of children who've never heard his name. Ivy creeps up even the cleanest temples. Theaters bloom in cities that once shunned him. He's everywhere. And the gods? They've finally noticed. You remember how it started. Hidden pregnancy, jealous wrath, thigh-birth, exile. Dionysus was never meant to succeed. He was a problem swept under divine rugs. But now, he's a god in full. A god twice born. A god embraced not just by misfits, but by the world. He stands. Come, he says. You walk with him, once again, up into the clouds. And there it is, Mount Olympus, gleaming, remote, smelling faintly of cooked lightning and pride. You expect resistance, but the gates open, not because they want to welcome him, because they must. The other gods are waiting. Zeus, thunder-eyed but quiet. Apollo, straight-backed and clearly uncomfortable. Athena, inscrutable, a scroll clutched too tightly. Even Hera, distant, her face unreadable. They make space. One empty throne. Dionysus pauses. For the first time he hesitates. Are you ready? You ask. He looks at you, really looks, and says, no. But it doesn't matter. Because readiness isn't the point. The point is arrival. He steps forward. The marble sings under his bare feet. Ivy curls around the legs of his seat. The air smells of figs and rain. He sits. Not with arrogance. With truth. And Olympus shifts. Not in thunder or quakes, but in tone. Because Dionysus brings something the other gods forgot. Humanity. Not just the noble kind. Not the valiant, glory-soaked version. He brings the weeping, trembling, chaotic, laughing mess of what it actually means to live. And the gods don't quite know what to do with that. They argue, of course. They debate precedent. They cite ancient scrolls and grumble about foreign influence. But it's done. He's seated. And as if to punctuate it, a breeze blows through the hall. It smells like home. You sit beside him on the steps, knees drawn up to your chest. For the first time in a long time, he's not moving. He just breathes. And in that stillness, you feel the weight of what's been won. It wasn't through war, not through conquest, through presence. He walked, he wept, he laughed, he survived, and in doing so he changed the world. Historians still argue over the moment Dionysus became an Olympian. Was it always destined? A late addition? A cultural compromise to appease rising worship? But you were there, and you know the truth. It wasn't the gods who elevated Dionysus. It was the people, the broken, the joyful, the dreaming. They crowned him with ivy. They called his name in the woods. And Olympus, finally, had no choice but to answer. Dionysus leans over now, whispering like you're still in a quiet grove somewhere, not the throne room of the divine. I'm not here to replace order, he says. I'm here to remind it that chaos has a seat, too. And that's the truth. He's not the end of law. He's its balance. Because joy without control is madness. But control without joy? That's something worse. You sit there a long time, watching the gods adjust to his presence. They won't say it, but they feel it. The pantheon has changed. Not forever, but for now. And sometimes, now is all we need. You've circled the world with Dionysus, across mountains and seas, through forests that breathed and cities that forgot how. You've watched him laughed at, worshipped, feared, followed. You've danced until your legs gave out, wept into the firelight, been changed by madness that didn't destroy, but revealed. And now, you find yourself in silence. Not absence. Fullness. The kind of quiet that comes only after a storm, or a lifetime. You're back in the woods, not any sacred mountain, not the haunted hills of Thebes, just a grove, somewhere out of time. The trees are old here, but kind. The air is thick with moss and memories. It smells like wet bark and distant incense. Dionysus is here too. But he isn't talking. He's resting, really resting, not the mock sleep of a god with a grin in one eye. He's lying on the ground, head on a log, fingers laced behind his head like a mortal man. You sit near him, knees drawn to your chest. He opens one eye. Do you remember the beginning? You nod. Semele. He smiles faintly. She burned for a truth she thought she wanted. And you were born from it, you whisper. Born from her, then him, then myself. That's the thing about Dionysus. He doesn't have a beginning. He has many. born from womb, from fire, from thigh, from madness, from love, from forgetting. You sit together, watching a snail navigate a blade of grass. Somewhere far off, a pan flute chirps lazily, someone still playing. The cult goes on, even if the god is resting, because it was never about worship. It was about recognition. You think about the people you met, the woman who wept into her wine and then sang, the man who danced himself into freedom, the king who disguised himself and found his end. And in all of them you saw Dionysus, not as a figure in myth, but as a mirror. He was never about conquest. He was about truth. Slippery, joyful, painful truth. About all the parts of you that don't fit neatly into names or rules, that ache, that laugh in the wrong places, that long to lose control just long enough to find something deeper. Are you done? You ask softly. He thinks, then shrugs. Gods don't answer questions like that. Instead, he sits up slowly, brushing moss from his elbows, looks at the trees. Maybe I'll vanish again, he says. Let them forget me. See if they still dream. Will they? He looks at you sideways. They always do. He stands, stretches, yawns wide enough to make a satyr proud, and walks into the trees. You don't follow this time, because you've already walked the circle. You've seen what he needed you to see. Not miracles, not magic, but the holiness of being broken open, and choosing not to close again. You lie back, eyes on the canopy, light shifting between the leaves. You breathe, deep, easy, and as sleep starts to gather at your edges like mist on the forest floor, you hear him say, from somewhere very far away, you were never lost. Just waiting to be found by yourself. And you believe him. Because some gods don't rule from thrones. Some gods rule from inside your laughter, from behind your tears, from the wild space between surrender and becoming. That's Dionysus, a god born twice, and never quite finished. And now the forest fades. The stars above soften. The laughter grows quiet. Your limbs are heavy, like cooled wax. Your breath, slow. The edges of your thoughts begin to blur, not disappear, but loosen, like threads unwinding from a spool. Let it go. Let the road dissolve behind you. Let the masks fall away, every name you've worn, every role you've held. Here, in this moment, in the hush between heartbeats, you are no longer a traveler or a witness. You are simply here. The gods are quiet now. Even Dionysus, wild and golden, has found his stillness. And in his silence, he leaves a gift behind. Not a blessing, not a promise, a reminder that joy does not need permission, that sorrow is not failure, that within you, the wild waits, patient and kind, ready when you are. Maybe tomorrow you'll feel it, in a song you forgot you loved, in a laugh you didn't see coming, in a tear that surprises you. That's him. That's you. Close your eyes, if you haven't already. Let the weight of the day sink out through your spine, down into the soil. Let the vines curl around your thoughts, slow and soft. You are safe here. You are whole here. And the story will wait for you, always. Sleep well, wild one. Sweet dreams.